The world is truly becoming flat. With the economies of countries becoming intertwined and interdependent on each other, the role of new and emerging economic shifts, such as the shift towards the creative economy, have a worldwide impact. Because a country was a leader in the past doesn't guarantee they will have a leadership role in the future. I'll be right back.
This is the Killer Innovations Podcast with Phil McKinney. Keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are Phil's, and Phil's alone, and they don't necessarily reflect those of his past, current, or future employers. Now, here's Phil McKinney.
I'm just getting back from my trip to India and Hong Kong last week. It's been some time since I've been back in the region. I was there quite often in the mid-90s, and a lot has changed. The most startling is the acceleration of their respective economies, both in India and in China. And not just from taking care of or taking over the knowledge workers' jobs and doing it cheaper. It truly is an economic boom in that region. They are truly embracing the change towards the creative economy. While Western governments and all of us in Western businesses stress over the continued shift towards offshoring, and quite honestly, I'm not a big fan of the term offshoring. I prefer to use the term right-shoring, doing the work at the right place, at the right time, for the right cost. And these Western governments not only are stressing on the offshoring, but also the immigration of low-cost labor. It's hard to miss any front-page newspaper these days where the U.S. is dealing with low-cost immigration, low-cost labor coming in from South America, or the EU dealing with Eastern European and North Africa labor coming in. India and China realize that their current position will not last forever. They're not content with just being the offshore, right-shoring, low-cost labor. They recognize that they need to be thinking about what is next. Now, don't get me wrong. Offshoring is clearly an issue that the world economies need to deal with. Forrester predicts that 3.3 million white-collar jobs, or about 136 billion in wages, will shift from the U.S. to low-cost countries such as India and China and Russia by 2015. And just so the rest of you don't think that you're immune, Western Europe will lose 1.2 million jobs in the same time frame. So the U.S. is looking to lose 3.3 million. Western Europe is looking to lose 1.2 million jobs in the same time frame. So it's not just the fact that we can grouse about it. It's a reality. Jobs are moving offshore. Now, with India and China, and given what I saw while I was there for 2 weeks, they recognize that they need to start now to be ready for the coming change. India's labor costs are already accelerating. Labor cost is not as cheap in India as many think. And in fact, many companies, Western companies, are now defocusing India and moving towards China and Eastern Europe as the next source of high-skilled, low-cost labor. The challenge that India and China have, though, is not that they know that they need to make the change, but how to change. They've spent years training up their students in what I would call left-brain careers. What I mean by left-brain careers are things like lawyers, accountants, doctors, and engineers. Everything that a parent wants their children to go into and has clearly orchestrated through their going to school, their studies, where they go to college, all around these what I would call left-brain careers. It's interesting to note that with these left-brain careers, that each of these jobs have certain characteristics to them. One is that they're rule-based analysis. Once you know the rules, if I'm an accountant, I know how to put a figure on the debit side or the credit side, and certain tax rules and certain laws. It's all about memorization of the rules. Same thing applies to lawyers. What is the law? The issues with doctors. It's all a decision tree process. It's all logic that applies to coming to a diagnosis. Rule this out, rule that out, rule this out. It must be this. Same thing with engineers. Understanding the rules, understanding the logic of writing a software program, the rules of writing a certain kind of software program, and what does that mean? So all of these left-brain careers have this common characteristics of being rules-based, being focused on logic, and they have some kind of tree-based decision-making. These are all things that can be taught. You can write a textbook on it. You can hold a college class. You can teach students about it. It's something that you can easily teach and transport around the world. Now, the difference being is that, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, including India, parents have been focusing on what they classified as successful careers, meaning these left-brain careers: lawyers, accountants, doctors, engineers, etc. Western society, and why has it that the Western society has flourished in what I would call the early wins in the creative economy, is because our society has been open to have its children explore what I would call right-brain careers. Right-brain careers such as performers, musicians, artists, inventors. And it isn't like there's a large percentage of the population that are going into those careers, but you have enough of an accepted mix in those career paths to therefore offset and have kind of that diversity of thinking within our society. Now, when a society is open to teaching its next generation on artistry, empathy, design, big picture perspective, risk-taking, individuality, you don't have to be like everybody else. You can be the individual. Those societies that are open to teaching this will be the winners in the creative economy. So what are some of the weak signals that countries like India and China are getting it? What makes me think, after I've been there for 2 weeks, that they're getting it? Well, a recent study shows that China will spend 136 billion US in research and development in 2006. 136 billion. How important is this? That outpaces Japan and makes China the number 2 country as far as total dollar spend behind the U.S. in research and development. Now, if that isn't a serious commitment to driving R&D from the standpoint of creating new things, I don't know what is. But keep in mind that it's not just about total dollar spend. Many people get wound up that it's 136 billion. Is that the right number? Well, that's not really tells the full story. As a percentage of GDP, gross domestic product, China has been more than doubled their investment in the past decade. So in 1995, China's R&D investment was 0.6% of their GDP went to research and development. And just think about how much economic growth you've seen in China in the last 10 years. And in 2004, that R&D percentage is now 1.2%. So this isn't just the fact that the number has grown because the economic success of China has grown. They've actually doubled the percentage of their GDP that they're committing to research and development over those 10 years. And this is kind of the first sign that a government or a region gets it. Not only are they in a path to drive economic growth, but they also recognize that they need to increase R&D as a percentage of the GDP. Now, keep in mind that the U.S. GDP, the U.S. total R&D investment is about $300 billion. So China's not that far behind the U.S., who has the number 1 slot today. Now, the unknown when it comes to India and China, from the perspective of do they really get it, do they really understand that the creative economy is emerging, is that their ability to have the necessary skill sets for the new economy. Are they going to shift their educational focus? Are they going to understand the importance of teaching not just the left brain skill sets, but right brain skill sets in order to win in the new economic growth? So why am I spending time in this podcast talking about India and China, their economic growth, the shift towards the creative economy, and the need for R&D investment, and the issues about offshoring and right-shoring? Why? Because it's about our jobs. It's about your job, my job, those jobs that we've all been in for long periods of times in our career. Are they safe given the economic shifts that are happening? What I've developed are 3 quick questions to test whether or not your job is firmly in the creative economy. Now, if you answer yes to any of these questions, you are not in the creative economy. You are firmly planted in the knowledge economy, which means your jobs are at risk. So if you answered yes to any of these three questions, question one, is your job repeatable? Do you do the same thing all the time? If you're an accountant and you close the books at the end of the month and at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, and you go through the same process, is your job repeatable? Two, can a computer do your job? Are you at risk of your job being moved out because of automation? And three, can someone else do it cheaper? Now, I know what everybody's doing right now is they're quickly thinking about their job, they're thinking about their career, and the issue here is that we're all going through some really juicy rationalization as to why you're not at risk. Now, I know many of the listeners here on the podcast are software development people. They're out there writing code, thinking, okay, I'm not at risk. But let's face it, you know you're at risk. You know that you can do software in India cheaper. And in fact, you're at risk for being replaced by automation. There's a lot of really good new programs that are coming out that will actually write code and replace the fundamental skills of software development. If you're a tax accountant, even if you're a lawyer, more and more companies are having their paralegal or pre-legal work being done in India and then coming back for final review by high-priced attorneys here in the U.S. as one example. Medical. I think I've used this example in previous podcasts where if you go into a hospital today and you get an X-ray taken and the radiologist reads it, the second opinion more than likely is going to occur in India. It's going to go over to India and it's going to be read by a radiologist there to get a second opinion and to write up the report. So the question here is have you answered yes? Can you honestly answer yes to any of these three questions? And if you can, then your job is at risk. You are not in position to win in the creative economy. And the key here is that you need to be thinking about how do you transform your job into what I would call a right brain kind of opportunity. How are you going to shift your job from where it is today to being right-brained? You may be in a left-brain career. You may be in software development. You may be an accountant. You may be an attorney. You may be a lawyer. You may be a documentation writer. You may be a call center. Lots of jobs. The key here is how do you shift that job to being a right-brained kind of a job? And if you heard me in the past rant and rave about the fact that I think the new MBA is the MFA, the Master of Fine Arts, it may mean going back and shifting your education skill sets. And let's face it, you're not listening to this podcast to maintain where you're at today. You're listening to these podcasts, other podcasts, reading books in order to build up your skill set to be able to take advantage of the fundamental shifts that are occurring in the economy. So you're going to be commended for that, but do more. If you've answered yes to any of these three, then you're at risk of being right short, unless, of course, you are one of those people who are living on the right shore. This week's killer question ties into this whole concept of what's happening in the economic shifts around the world. Now, many of us tend to get our heads stuck in the sand based on where we live and where the majority of our customers come from, and forget about the fact that there is a big wide world out there. Now, I can tell you from my trip through India and China, I saw a lot of really interesting new emerging areas and new emerging opportunities for my business and for my company. And I think anybody, if you just open up your eyes and you go spend some time in those geographies that you would never consider visiting or you don't think are even a fit for your product or service, go and look. You would be totally surprised. So this week's killer question is, what economic shifts are happening in other geographies that create opportunities for my products and services? Is it the increase in average income? Is it the amount of R&D investment? Is it government support of certain programs? What economic shifts are happening in other geographies that create opportunities for my products and services? And the secondary question to this is, what changes do I need to make to my products and services to take advantage of these economic shifts? So first off, identify the economic shifts that are happening in other parts of the world, and then look at your products and services and say, what changes do you need to make to take advantage? And here, let me give you some examples. Procter & Gamble in India. Now, with the explosion and growth of the middle class, obviously, products coming from big brand, kind of Western companies like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, and others clearly are attractive to these growing economies. However, there are some changes that those companies need to make. In the case of Procter & Gamble, what they figured out is rather than selling those big bottle jugs of laundry detergent, go with much smaller packets, something that people in a more cash-based economy can afford given their current cash flow, but also then price it in such a way that it becomes viable for the local economy. So rather than going off and buying laundry detergent in big jugs, those economies tend to be very receptive to laundry detergent that is like almost in single-serve kind of packets. In some cases, the local shoppers will buy one packet and they stretch it out over 2 or 3 days. But that starts to introduce your product in. So in this case, by shifting the size and volume and pricing of the packaging from the standpoint of a per purchase price and getting down into where they may have to come back 2 or 3 times a week and purchase detergent in order to have it for a week, they can get it into the size and per unit price that's attractive for the local economy. So in this case, Procter & Gamble went with a whole new packaging concept in order to get into these new emerging markets. And while I was in India, I was reading in the local newspaper in Bangalore about Citibank coming in and deploying ATMs from a standpoint of a wide base within all the Indian cities. And the interesting point here is Citibank is not aiming this at the middle and upper class within India. They're actually aiming those ATMs to what the world economy refers to as the unbanked. People who do not have a means to actually even get a banking relationship in place. And keep in mind that the way people pay bills, etc., is a little different than outside most of the Western countries. And in the case of India and others, ATMs and others are being set up to start allowing you to pay your bills. So in India, Citibank is committed to rolling out just an unbelievably large number of ATMs in India. And rather than having the residents have to remember a PIN code, etc., it's all by biometrics. So literally you walk up, you put your finger down, it recognizes you. And rather than having text on the screen, given literacy rates, it's all done by graphical means, and it's done by voice. So it actually talks the person through the transaction that is being performed on the ATM machine. So you don't even have to have a literacy rate now in order to take advantage of ATM. Now, the interesting thing is that Citibank believes that the opportunity is so large that they will actually be profitable with this program in the first 12 months. So think about it. People tend to think that if you're going to go into, what's referred to as the bottom of the pyramid, that you're going to get into very low margin, very small amount, etc. But Citibank believes that because the market is so large and because of the uniqueness of what they're trying to offer, where nobody else is stepping into that niche, that they will actually be profitable. Not hugely profitable. They'll make 30 or 40 million US in the first year, but they are predicting that they will actually be profitable in the first year. So again, this week's killer questions are: what economic shifts are happening in other geographies that create opportunities for my products and services? And the follow-on question is: what changes do I need to make to my products and services to take advantage of these economic shifts? This week's closing thought is about leadership and the leadership position that many developed countries think they have. One of the fallacies that developed countries use to justify their leadership position is the results of the education system, whether it's by test scores, whether it's by what they know in science and math, which tends to be thought of as a leading indicator for thought leadership. They truly believe that test results and such things as percentage of population going to college, percentage of the population graduating from college, prove they will always be the leaders in the world economy. Now, don't get me wrong, education is important, but it's not the end result. It's just the beginning. As one famous anonymous quote goes, education is only the ladder with which to gather fruit from the tree of knowledge, not the fruit itself. Again, education is only the ladder with which to gather fruit from the tree of knowledge, not the fruit itself. It's about continuous learning. You wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you weren't interested in continuing your self-education. And this week's quote is from Jim Rohn, where he says, "Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune." Thanks for listening to this week's Killer Innovations podcast. Send your feedback, comments, suggestions to podcast@killerinnovations.com. You can also Skype me at Phil_McKinney. Also, feel free to join my LinkedIn network. Send me a LinkedIn invite to podcast@killerinnovations.com. Please note that you are a listener. I get a lot of LinkedIn requests, and unless I note clearly that you are a listener, I normally do not accept them. Don't forget to vote for your favorite podcast. Leave comments about your favorite podcast shows at iTunes, Podcast Alley, whatever podcast site you go to find the show. Also, feel free to post comments about each specific show over at the podcast site for Killer Innovations. So just go to killerinnovations.com, click on the comments button at the bottom of the show notes, and leave your thoughts and comments. And why don't you kick off the discussion with the other listeners. This week, I've also received a lot of feedback on this idea of producing a CD of the Killer Innovations content. The feedback has been unbelievably strong. And just for those of you who did not listen to the podcast a couple of podcasts ago about this, the idea is that based on feedback from listeners who would like to share some of the content with their management teams, with their team members, coworkers, or employees about innovation and about creativity. I've been asked by a number of listeners to identify a favorite podcast or which ones they should get people to listen to. And rather than just identifying the podcast, what I was thinking of doing is producing a CD that contained content from the podcast that is basically repurposed for specifically to give people the entire story in basically on one CD. Something that you can give to your management, to your organization, to your employees. And the objective is to give you a tool to help change your organization. So, still listening for feedback. I'm interested in getting your thoughts. So, what content would you recommend be included on the CD? Which of the podcasts have you listened to from Killer Innovations that you found most useful, found that you would like to have be able to be shared? And who would you share it with? Give me some feeling for who your audience is, whether it's your management team, coworkers, your employees. Now, the thought here is I'm not doing this to make money. As you know, my passion for doing the Killer Innovation podcast is my way of paying it forward. So I'm actually going to produce this, record this, put it up on the site, allow you to download it, burn it to a CD. I will also have CDs made, but I'll just charge basically my out-of-pocket cost to cover them. I'm planning on doing or producing, writing, and hopefully even getting the recording done during the holiday break. So send your ideas on the CD project to podcast@killerinnovations.com. Also, if you have any other feedback, suggestions for upcoming shows, etc., please get those to me. I'm collecting a new set of lists as I'm going into the new year to kind of lay out some of the upcoming content. Also, if there's content in the past that you think we should go back and do more investigations into. So, for instance, I am currently working on an upcoming podcast on how to break through what I would call the creativity block, where we all get stuck on our ability to come up with new ideas. We just get cold on our ability to come up with something fresh. So that's one idea that came from the listener. So if you have ideas, please send them to me. And thanks again for taking the time in your busy schedule to listen to the podcast. I truly do appreciate the time you take to sit down and listen, give me feedback, and hopefully you find the podcast beneficial to you. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.